for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series.
They're going to get back for two. India at home. Lords goes wild.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the 81 All Out podcast. I'm Siddhartha Vaidyanathan at Sidvi on Twitter. And today I'm joined by two friends of the podcast, the Cricket Couch, Subhash Jayaraman. Hi, Subhash.
Hey, Sid. What's up?
Hey, and from Pakistan, again joining us is Ahmed Naqvi at Karachi Katmal on Twitter. Hi, Karachi.
Hi, guys.
Hi. So today we're going to talk about India versus Pakistan in World Cups. We're focusing on the rivalry, if you want to call it the rivalry. Many in India may not want to attribute that word to it, but we want to talk about how things have changed from 92 to now, what it means to different people from on either side of the border, and for the fans in general, and also the intensity of the hype that we have seen over the last few years. So let me first begin with Subhash. Looking back, do you think it's a bit strange that it took till 92 for India and Pakistan to play in a World Cup? There were 4 World Cups before that and never happened, including the one in the subcontinent where everyone was hoping they would play in the final.
Technically, till Reliance Cup, the World Cup concept itself didn't take hold for the first 4 editions. It really took hold after it left the shores of England, really. Till then, it was like you go to some Maidan and join, like, chalo, let's play some match here and there. That's how it was. They pulled in teams, but typically there was no hype around it. Nobody really knew about it. However, the fact that World Cup, these 2 teams playing in World Cup would hold the attention of not just these 2 nations, but a wider audience, didn't really take a foothold till basically cable television was common, and you could basically brainwash the people into thinking like this is the most important thing in sport. And since then, even though the fortunes have swung from one side to another to the extreme, still there are your TV anchors and ex-cricketers and chaiwala and chowkidars, everybody saying, this is life and death issue, which I don't think it is, because it is only...
Isn't chaiwala and chowkidar the same person?
It depends. It depends what year we are talking. If it's 2014, it's chai. 2019 is chalk. So, people change, man, over time.
And it also, I think it should tell us a bit about the TV aspect to the whole thing, right? As you brought up, before 92 and even before 87, I don't think people realized and I don't think there was any avenue to realize the potential of India-Pakistan. But now, I mean, over the last so many years, the tournament itself has been designed in a way that India and Pakistan have to meet at least once. And if they don't, it's economic stupidity, so to speak.
I mean, exactly. See what happened in 2007 World Cup.
I think also, I think the TV is at the heart of it, because like what Subhash, just building up on what he said about the World Cups on English shores, us waqt tak cricket as a televisual spectacle wasn't really a global thing, right? Like, kya kehte hain ke there was I think it was really the Sharjah kind of series that starts the whole idea of this one day international becoming a big TV spectacle. And again, that's also the era where both those countries started having greater access to television. And so 92, I think also, it's very poignant or very fitting that Pakistan India played for the first time then, because it is really the first modern World Cup. It's very similar. I often compare it to the 1970 World Cup in soccer, where it really makes that whole spectacle, takes it to another level. Color television, colored clothes, new format. It really helped that there was a lot of really compelling narratives to it. And so the Pakistan-India thing just became another really exciting angle to it. And since then, I think as we pointed out, there's only been 2 World Cups where they haven't played each other. So I think that it was almost an inevitability. And perhaps the reason that it took so long was that the things that made it inevitable hadn't really come around in the previous editions of the World Cup.
So let me bring in Khatmal here, and I want to get a bit of your experiences from the 90s and especially the early 90s, around the 92 time frame. How was it like for you in Pakistan when you were watching the matches against India? Did it come as was there a sense of inevitability to a lot of it? Because Pakistan had a stupendous record against India back then. Whenever they played, especially in Sharjah, it was they always had the upper hand. So talk us a bit about your thoughts of India games at that time.
So I was 8 years old when the 92 World Cup happened. And so when that particular match, I remember, that like basically just that whole tension, oh my God, we're playing India. And I think like, whatever time of the game, because it was a day-night game, but I think I only remember watching Pakistan bat, which was we were chasing. And, right from the offset, it felt like there was a lot of tension around it. But I think that match also, I mean, again, I was much younger. They didn't have a lot of template, etc. But otherwise, in the 90s, I felt the very typical 90s match was played out in the last year's 2017 Champions Trophy final. I think that was essentially the kind of experience you had as a 90s fan supporting Pakistan in India matches, because you were batting first. So, I think that was one of the major templates in our victories. And then there's a left-handed opener who's having a fucking great time. And you have random middle order guys who are like chipping in, like have Mohammad Hafeez's innings in that final was such an Ijaz or early Inzamam or early Mohammad Yohana type innings where just like this middle order batsman was coming in, he's immediately finding some good runs, etc. And then when India bat, right at the start, your bowlers, kind of decimate their top order, and so they kind of just limp towards the inevitable end. Like it was very, very reminiscent of how Pakistan India matches would play out in the 90s, which meant that every time we faced in a World Cup match, it was one thing to lose to India in a World Cup, but it was also that those matches played out so differently from the kind of template that we'd set up. So like I believe 96, though I remember we were chasing, and 92 we were chasing. I think 99 also Pakistan was chasing.
Yep.
And so that was already like, something that...
Only time India chased was in 2003.
2003, yeah, 2003, you're right. So, that was one of those, like right from the get-go, you felt something was off. Then again, the 92 team was, right in the middle of its complete zenith, just in the worst possible phase. The 96 team was missing Wasim on the eve. So it was really the 99 one actually was probably the bigger shock, I guess, in certain ways. But I think at that time, it very much felt like these are aberrations because I think the record isn't as one-sided as I remember it in the 90s, but definitely in just about every important match, every crucial match, Pakistan would have the upper hand. And so it just kind of felt like, the team just had 3 bad days across that decade. It was really after 2003 that you kind of started feeling like, okay, this isn't this bad, and at least before maybe a slightly weaker side won the matches. Since then, it's been the stronger side that's been winning the matches quite comfortably.
I mean, looking at the record of, India v Pakistan in ODIs, 70s, they played only 3 games. Pakistan won 2, India won 1. 80s, it's a 2-to-1 ratio to Pakistan. 90s, it's 26 games, Pakistan won, 17, India won. So it's like, and 2000s, Pakistan won more games than India, like a little bit, but still, Pakistan had the advantage. Like they won 55% of the game, like that. But it's only 2010s that India has the upper hand in ODIs, cumulatively speaking. Also, they don't play that much each other.
Yeah.
And in this, at least in the past 10 years or so, Indian team, especially since 2005 anyway, the team has taken leaps and bounds ahead, and Pakistan hasn't caught up to the modern game that much. for many number of reasons. You can go search Asan Chima's Twitter timeline. There will be like thousands of stories on that.
I think they're going, rather than putting yourself through the arduous task of checking out Chima's timeline, I think the simplest answer to really what takes those two teams apart, and as teams, like politically and culturally, this will always be a rivalry, but as teams, that rivalry kind of stops being that important ever since the Mumbai attack in 2008, because that dovetails into cricket ending in Pakistan. It also means Pakistanis are no longer in the IPL. I think in terms of white ball cricket, IPL, at least for me, is like the Ivy Leagues or whatever. Like that's where the Champions League in football or whatever. That's where I think that's where all the next generation skills are being developed. And Pakistan not being a part of that, I think, has had the biggest toll on its white ball cricket.
Subhash, what were your thoughts of the India-Pakistan games, and did you look at it as a big rivalry, like as much as India versus, say, some other team, say Australia or South Africa maybe, or did you look at it as something quite special?
I mean, I grew up with 6 older brothers, so I didn't really, when it came to cricket, I learned the sport from them, played with them in the backyard, got bullied by them, all that stuff. So I immediately took up whatever they were doing while watching a cricket match. And they would watch most of the other games too when India plays, but they'll definitely watch India-Pakistan and they'll root for India. So without really understanding, sure, I was 15 years old in 1992, but coming into 92, between 87 and 92, you're in a very impressionable age. You think you know everything, but you don't know anything. So you just copy whatever your elders are doing at home. And they were like very pro-India, India support, yeah. So I thought I have to support India. And going into the game, since I didn't have any historical background of how badly India has done against Pakistan, I went into every game thinking that India was going to win, of course, because you don't know any better. And then as the game unfolds, you think, oh man, another time Pakistan has beaten India. And because at that time in the early 90s, you saw a lot of Sharjah and stuff, right? So, I got to see Aqib Javed's hat trick, and which I disagree. It's not even, I don't think 2 out of the 3 were out.
Can we retrospectively apply DRS?
I did ask Aqib Javed this too. Like retrospectively DRS. Us zamane mein, if you had DRS, what would have happened? He's like, oh, they were definitely out. And then you smile, laugh.
I mean, I think even retrospectively, if we try to apply DRS, the BCCI won't let us. So,
but then if DRS happens and then it says not out, and then conspiracy theory will start about how Saeed Ajmal, Sachin Tendulkar, Mohali 2011 karke, people will start. Anyway, we can never win these things. But anyway, so that's how I went into every game, India v Pakistan, that India was going to win, and then they would lose invariably, except in World Cups. And 92 World Cup especially, it was a board exam, my 10th board exam. I was preparing for my math exam. I went to my friend's house. So I missed most of India's batting, except for towards the end. And then I saw all of Pakistan's batting. And one of my vivid memory from that match is protest in the stands, Free Khalistan. I remember that. And then remembering the stadium was like sparsely crowded. It's only 50% or 60% of the stadium was full. And I was like, hey, yeah. But anyway, I mean, those were the days, 92, I suppose. But then I remember Srinath's Yorker to Miandad and More's Naughty with Javed Miandad, all that. But in that age, I always expected India would win. Mostly they lost, except in World Cup.
Talking about the crowd and the fact that the stadium was, only sparsely filled, I think it also tells us about how the intensity of that game was far, far lesser than what you would see in an India-Pakistan game now, not only on the field, but even off it. I mean, I was going through some archival reports, and I saw that the Times of India had done a very small report on that game. There was a Sunil Gavaskar column, of course, but the report itself was, what you would expect for not that big a game, and they treated it as it was a group game in a World Cup, unlike an India-Pakistan game now, which of course will have like a 20, at least 20 articles and several other things along with it. So I think the intensity was less. But if you look from 92 to 96, somehow in that period of time, there was quite a shift, because by the time 96 came around, and Khatmal, you can tell us about the Pakistani reaction, because when Pakistan lost that quarterfinal in Bangalore, especially with Wasim Akram not playing and things, and he wasn't even allowed, I mean, he didn't even go back to where he was supposed to go, right? He took a detour, and then there were a lot of protests, and people died and all, because, I think there was even a couple of suicides on that day, tragically.
I mean, I think, again, like I think Subhash put it really well, that, at that age, you are kind of taking the world as it is. You don't really have any context to question it. My abiding memory of the 96 quarterfinal was that I was obsessed with Wasim Akram at that age. And once he didn't play it, or basically everyone that I knew who was older to me, I remember my uncle, but there were lots of other people as well. They'd just be like, ha ha, your hero is a fixer. Like, which I would later learn that sort of bitterness is a Pakistani or a Desi way to kind of deal with their own hurt. But, like at that point, I remember just being super defensive that no, it wasn't a fix, and we lost and whatever. But it was the kind of reaction when you read up about it, especially for the players, it was definitely something that, a sort of Rubicon had been crossed. Their flight back home had to be diverted. Wasim Akram's house was attacked, lots of other players, but dealt with a lot of other things. And when you add that into the context, now I remember the World Cup, Pakistan was not playing so well. We qualified as third out of 4 teams. But we were defending champions, and that era, that team was actually, arguably the best Pakistan ever had in terms of just how loaded with talent it was, and it had a really good record in and around that time. So you kind of see we were defending champions as well, and so I think in both countries where that trajectory of cricket becoming a truly crossing over from like this national pastime to national obsession, that takes place. And again, it's in the backdrop of hockey dying a slow death, both sides of the border. Pakistan were world champions actually in 94, but, it was definitely cricket had captured that imagination. It had really broken out of the sort of urban elite. And again, television had a big part to play in that. And so, and again, like there's so much more money involved as well. So this kind of the specter of match fixing really first comes up in Pakistan cricket at the start of the 80s, but it's the 90s where it kind of becomes an endemic issue of sorts. And I think most importantly, obviously not for fans like myself, but people who had been watching this team in the 80s where, it was a lot less talented and a lot more, just had a lot more fight to it. Versus if you look at the 96 final, it's kind of weird because India beats Pakistan mentally as much as it beats them on the field. The assault that Jadeja does on Waqar at the final 3 overs, it's really quite, I think, anomalous when you look at India's ODI kind of successes against Pakistan up until that point. Like, that was one of those rare moments where an Indian batsman successfully got on top of one of these Pakistani fast bowlers, Wasim, Waqar, Imran, Aqib, whatever, and, left their mark on the game. And then again, like chasing as well, Pakistan kind of collapses. And it's like, unlike, let's say, the 86 match or the 2003 match, the scars of this match don't really seem to translate. Like, Pakistan reverts back to being the dominant team as soon as the World Cup is over. But it was definitely, I think, a turning point, for fans, for the players, for the rivalry in particular.
For me, 96 was an eye-opener in terms of following cricket, and especially India v Pakistan. Because, I come from Tamil Nadu, southernmost state in the country, and you're kind of removed from the India v Pakistan hostilities, right? You live in your own paradise, all the stuff, and you think differently about these things. However, in '96, I was in college in Uttar Pradesh, in Varanasi, right? So I watched game with a lot of my classmates, hostel mates. They were all from either UP, Bihar, Delhi, that area, West Bengal, and a lot of them had family that moved from current day Pakistan to India during partition. So those guys hated Pakistan, um, at least in cricket, as far as they would admit in public at those times. Maybe now it is open season, but back then you still held your true feelings back and in polite company, all that. So at least they would never, they wanted India to crush Pakistan. Whereas coming from Tamil Nadu, I'm like, it's a sport, yeah, you want India to win because it's your team, but you didn't have any essential hatred for another team. Take it, yaar, it's a game is game. You play hard, you play fair, and then end of it, you shake your hands, walk off. That's when I got real how personal people take. When you said about people dying of heart attacks or committing suicide or attacking somebody's house, those thoughts never crossed my mind. Whereas there, it's like Sala Marosko was very common. And I watched that game, '96 game, in college common room. It's a 15 by 20 room with solitaire TV, color TV, and there was 200 of us packed in. It was Ajay Jadeja hits, room goes crazy, and then Sohail starts. Sohail and Anwar start, and then everybody is dead. Right, and then Sohail points the bat, and the next ball he gets cleaned up. So because it's a common room, you have to go. So I ran during the break. Everybody goes out for sutta and stuff. I never left. I moved ahead and sat right in front of the TV so I could watch the chase. But when Sohail got out, I've never been hit by so many. I've never been hit by a chappal in my life, except for that one time. People from back of the room throwing chappals. I'm sitting in front of the TV, so obviously they miss the TV most of the time, and they back on their head, But then once that partnership fell, and then a couple more wickets fall, Kumble comes into play, and then you see the old Miandad, one last stand, and Rashid Latif was still there. You thought there is something still possible because you've seen in the last 4 years Pakistan can come from anywhere and win. But that was an eye opener as to India v Pakistan, and I must say, that I was not a huge fan of taking a sport that seriously. That you're hinging your national pride on a collection of 11 people playing against 11.
Also, I think it was around that time when there was the India-Pakistan angle, of course, and but there was also this the Indian fans there was the impatience about them, and there was this expectation and anger. We saw that in the semi-final in '96 semi-final against Sri Lanka, of course, when India were in not a great position and the crowd got in and the match had to be abandoned. But I was at the ground for the '96 quarterfinal in Bangalore, and I noticed more than a Pakistani hatred. More than that, I noticed just a growing impatience with the Indian team, especially when Sohail and Anwar were batting, and they were going at a blistering pace, and it was unnerving to watch, in fact, because people were getting so sure that Pakistan would probably win with 10 overs to spare or something. That's how quickly they were going.
I mean, it seems to me like overblown sense of entitlement. There was this opening liberalization of the economy, and since '91, and every newspaper around the world has been writing about how the sleeping giant of Asia is going to come and take over. And you also have, just because we had 1.2 billion people doesn't automatically mean everything is going to be overachieving. It's not going to happen overnight. Just because you had a Sachin Tendulkar in your team who was playing above and beyond anybody's imagination. That guy was setting a new level for excellence. He thought automatically that means every team that India plays should just bow down to them and then, hand their asses to them and say, like, thanks for spanking. There was a sense of entitlement, I think Indian fans developed. And which is why that, when Tendulkar gets out in that match, Ataur Rahman comes in for Wasim and inside edge bowled, the crowd goes completely dead quiet, dead silent. And the next time the crowd is that silent is when Sohail and Anwar were batting. And it was like phenomenal batting. You should have to appreciate it. But that grace, it seems, had left by and large because Indians expected India to perform so well, dominant, crush opponents, that they couldn't feel it in them to have that grace to appreciate the good things that are happening, even though it's by the opposition team.
I just want to make one note for the listeners here that we've, in the build-up to the World Cup, we did a special podcast on the 96 World Cup. So I'll link that in the notes so you can listen to it and hear more about the India-Pakistan game there in Bangalore. We spoke a lot about it, so I'll put it in there. So between 96, the years following 96, I think, I haven't checked the stats, but between 96 and 99, is probably the time when India and Pakistan played the most. There was, that famous Sahara Cup that they used to go and play in Toronto. And then they actually played a test series in India as well. They played another series too. And so by the time 99 came around, at least for me personally, there was a lot of familiarity with the India-Pakistan games. And I personally didn't, I didn't feel as if, we're meeting Pakistan after a long time. You've seen all these players, and of course in television you've seen Pakistan play other teams too. So you've seen how everything goes. But interestingly, 99 was probably the only time when India and Pakistan played a World Cup match with when they were actually at war. I mean, Kargil was had begun, and the soldiers. There was, in fact, when India played Pakistan that very day, there were soldiers who were killed, and the match went on. I'm just trying to think of that situation now. I mean, I can surely see a boycott if that was to happen now.
One of the big things that changed, particularly after 2008. Was that up until then, Pakistan and India would generally have, like these pretty awkward kind of relationships. And cricket was like the only kind of impasse that at least they'll go and play in Sharjah and whatever. Then in 99, obviously, Pakistan, other than Kargil and everything, in October, Pervez Musharraf takes over. And you have a very clear symmetry that every time Pakistan is under military rule, India comes over for tours, and it's always a really successful thing. It happened under the Musharraf regime, and it was, there's a great book on it by Rahul Bhattacharya called Pandits from Pakistan that really captures the magical kind of vibe to that tour. And so from that moment onwards, in film and culture, there's a lot of like interaction that started happening, different trade, etc. And cricket stopped being like basically the one main thing that the two countries kind of connected on. But at the same time, it started becoming the most important of those things. And so after 2008, what you see is that India and Pakistan will still be trading. They'll still have some sorts of interactions, even at a political level. But the one place where India, at least in particular, has drawn the line is cricket. Where now cricket is the vehicle through which conflict is played out. I think that's been a really big shift. And so obviously if that happened right now, I would imagine more than a boycott, the World Cup being cancelled or something, or something really drastic like that. Because like when you even look at what happened after Pulwama, for example, in India, at least sitting from the outside, what it feels like is now that while there's a lot less pressure on the government to suspend ties, etc., there's an insane amount of pressure on private entities and individuals to suspend ties and renounce anything to do with Pakistan, and particularly in the field of cricket.
I mean, after Pulwama, wasn't there actually calls for boycotting Pakistan in the World Cup?
This match, yeah.
But India, and I think Sena's voice is actually, including Sachin possibly, that said, if you really feel that way, the best opportunity is to get on the field and defeat the team. Like why would you boycott them and give a easy 2 points? If you want, you should step in their way and take away those 2 points and not allow the team to proceed ahead to the knockout stages. Wouldn't that be better? I mean, in a weird sense, in a weird way, that makes sense, but still, it's less insane than saying, oh, you got to boycott. As you said, it has become a vehicle for national pride. Cricket has become, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is, for example, like right now things are at this really high temperature level, but, Modi dropped by Lahore to meet Nawaz and stuff like that. And I mean, I've looked this up a bunch of times. Trade has shrunk, obviously, every time after an incident, but it hasn't stopped. And so you kind of also, I mean, I'm very glad that there's no war happening and things aren't worse, but it is frustrating as a cricket fan because, I mean, if I just have to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's agitating, like, wouldn't you rather want something more decisive like trade and diplomatic ties to be cut instead of just calling for a cricket match to be called off? But I think just in terms of the way the symbolism works out, it's a win-win situation for a lot of people where you could make cricket pay the price and it gets a lot of attention and it gets a lot of people talking about it, and it's ultimately it is not costing anyone that much, which is another really major thing that's changed since the the 90s or whatever, is that this Indian cricket economy is at a level where they don't really need anyone. Forget Pakistan.
That's true. Anyway, coming back to the '99 World Cup, I had moved out of India, come to United States as a student, so we had to buy a satellite dish to watch the tournament. So we set in my friend's apartment, we set it up and we watched the game. And even though Kargil and all that happened, you have all these thousands of miles of distance that buffered you from actual goings on in terms of everyday TV and all that. And plus, it's early internet age, so you don't have major streaming or anything, so you don't get news that often either. So we were kind of insulated from all that, and we just watched the match as any other India-Pakistan match. India won, but Pakistan had this amazing collection of individuals. They should have won every single game, and they should have won the tournament, obviously. But India somehow finds a way. I mean, they lose to freaking Zimbabwe and somehow beat Pakistan. I don't get it. It's not like Tendulkar was missing for the Zimbabwe game in '99, but he didn't make a huge score against Pakistan in '99. But yet somehow Pakistan finds a way to lose. Prasad.
I mean, Pakistan lost to Bangladesh also in that World Cup.
Again, like with Pakistani players across generations, when they're doing well and they do whatever, if in that Hal article of Usman, if you just listen to what the players are saying themselves, and you can read that in others as well, it's all about, oh, we suddenly felt super confident. I think the flip side of that is that they get super complacent as well. And in fact, I think after that Zimbabwe game or before the Zimbabwe game, Wasim took the entire team to an amusement park, and they went on all these roller coasters and everything, and then they all felt a lot better. I think that is the kind of, especially with that team, there's a lot of really young players in it. There was there was a kind of arrogance that came into them very quickly.
See, around that time, it was also between '99 and 2004. I mean, for those 5 years, you also had games like the Chennai Test in '99, when Pakistanis were given a standing ovation at the end of the game. And then when India went to Pakistan in 2004, you had that great one-dayer in Karachi, where the Pakistanis returned the favor after India won that game, a really thrilling game of the last ball, and the Pakistani crowd then applauded them. So you had those moments and those gestures that sort of brought people closer. I mean, even though it was there was a genuine warmth to it, it wasn't just idle symbolism. There was, you could see that people were appreciating the good cricket from both sides. But now with the teams not playing at all, except for in ICC tournaments, there is, and not not traveling across the border and any of that sort, the chance of even observing those things is gone. And then automatically then you develop that brick wall between the them and us syndrome and things like that, when it's actually, there is technically, there is no them and there is no us. It's all people, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah, of course. And the cricket itself on the field was fantastic, and India obviously starts shakily against Netherlands and then lose to Australia and then build back momentum. And then comes this March 1st, 2003 match. And the cricket was fantastic. India was very clinical in that game. And, Saeed Anwar was, man, what a batsman. By that time, Saeed Anwar had grown the beard. The 99 Saeed Anwar was awesome. But 2003 is, I think it was a comeback and unbelievable batting. But anyway, Tendulkar plays.
You have to keep in mind is that 2003, it's very much the Expendables, that franchise that Sylvester Stallone or whatever built with like all these aging action stars. That was the scene in Pakistan where you were on the verge of seeing the 90s team disintegrate. They were all really old. They were overweight. They were out. They're not fit. Saeed Anwar had been out of form for a while. Inzamam was actually just unable to score a single run because he'd lost too much weight. So it's,
the funny thing is he lost all the weight and he still was run out in that game.
Yeah, he started off, I think he had 2 fours of Kumble or something and then gets...
he had 1 boundary of Kumble and then he gets out right away.
Yeah. And I think, in the narrative of that match, what had happened was Pakistan had a pretty shit start to the World Cup. And then this is the first time ever that we batted first in a World Cup match against India. And so everybody's like, okay, cool. If you apply the 90s kind of mindset, this is a perfect script for Pakistan. But the team that India would become in the 2000s, particularly Yuvraj playing that end of that chase, that was really much the template for what the ideal kind of Indian ODI narrative would be like. And so it's really a fascinating match where it decisively, very much like that 86 game in Sharjah, that changes. And there's I think when you were describing Sachin played well and he got out, I think you missed the most important part where Sachin was dropped by Abdul Razak.
32 on the circle. Well within the circle, yeah.
Yeah, and that was basically, I think, probably for me is the abiding memory of that match, because in that, up until that time, as you mentioned, the 90s World Cup games were kind of aberrations. But if you go back to the fact that Pakistan was dominating, one of the things that was really a big thing was that while Pakistan were usually not be good at doing the small things right, versus India, they managed to get that going. They'd hold on to their catches, they'd hit the stumps, or they'd field better, or they'd run better, etc. And so seeing Pakistan had put up a great total, was bowling pretty well, there's a lot happening, and Sachin was counter-attacking. And so in that moment, it really felt, especially in hindsight as well, but particularly I remember then just that was, it felt like that whole narrative which was about to collapse. Probably the first moment that you felt it like something had changed.
Well, the funny thing is, I think around that time, the 2003, 4, 5 is when, India became a really good chasing team. Sure, Tendulkar was still the linchpin of batting, but there was enough batting stocks, enough experience and power that even if Sachin had gotten out for 32, let's say, I think India had enough in the tank to counter and seriously challenge the total. However, it's all hypothetical. The funny thing there is India. By the way, there is this awesome piece that Rahul Bhattacharya wrote about the 3 shots that Tendulkar plays of Shoaib Akhtar, the 18-run over.
Yeah.
I mean, like with the square cut 6 and the flick and the straight drive. Phenomenal piece. Anyway, like the innings that Mohammad Hafeez plays, it goes completely unnoticed. This is very similar to what Kohli did in 2011 final, where Sehwag and Tendulkar get out. Kohli comes in and like puts a nice 39 with Gautam Gambhir, sets the platform, no collapse, chalo, and then Dhoni takes over. Similarly here, Caf comes, like potters around for a while, other end Tendulkar is scoring, and then they set the platform up for Yuvraj and Dravid. Like very eerily similar matches. But both those innings go unnoticed.
I think one thing also is that essentially now we can say that the 2003 match was the end of the 90s dynamic between India and Pakistan, and the start of not just the new India-Pakistan dynamic, but the new dynamic for the Indian cricket team, particularly in ODIs. So if we apply the 90s paradigm, for example, you would often see Sachin start really brightly in a big chase and then get out before he could like be decisive about anything. And then the Indian middle order, which generally had lots of really good players or players who could do well, etc., kind of crumble against the Pakistanis, who would then suddenly all 5 of them would start firing. And because as I said, the Expendables thing, that this was very much a collection of your greatest hits coming back together for one final job kind of Ocean's 11 situation. And that I think that for the romantic kind of ending, you could have seen something like that happen. The big obviously change had been that India, it wasn't that game where India changed. They had found players like Caf, like Yuvraj, like Dravid and Ganguly. In fact, I would even argue that were now just it was a very different team from the one Pakistan was used to beating.
Which brings me to the most expected India-Pakistan match that never happened in Barbados in 2007. I mean, that is like the biggest, as they say.
KLPD was invented for this.
And there were people from the US and traveling to Barbados for that match, and they went and ended up seeing. Subhash, you didn't go for that one, no?
I went to Antigua expecting India to be playing Australia and New Zealand, and they never showed up.
Okay, but you didn't.
I ended up watching Bangladesh getting whooped by New Zealand and Australia.
In fact, during that Bangladesh-Ireland match in Barbados, there was like a whole stand of people waving India and Pakistan flags, and there were some television people went and interviewed them in the break and all that.
I mean, funnily enough, when I was in Antigua, I was watching. There was a delay in the game due to rain, Australia-Bangladesh game, and so I was like, chilling with my friends. I had gone from the university, so we were watching, and this one guy from Times of India comes to me and he's like, "Oh, you must be severely disappointed that India is not here." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I mean, they lost, they went home. I'm here to watch cricket." He's like, "Oh, did you spend all your life savings?" I'm like, no, he was trying to get some quotes to say that, my entire world had collapsed because Bangladesh and Sri Lanka beat India in the first round. I'm like, no, I'm in the Caribbean. I've never been to Antigua before. And just before the match started, I ran into Vivian Richards for the first time in my life. And, we talked about the 83 final. Me and my friends, we talked a bit about the final outside. And we come in, and then in this rain delay, there's using super stopper and stuff. And this guy is like, "Oh, nahi yaar. We are in the Caribbean. We are looking forward to a test cricket match." No.
You should have put your hand inside, you should have put your hand in a duffel bag and pulled out a Bangladesh Tigers costume. I said, "No, I'm a Tiger supporter."
I was like, the reporter looking for that one angle, like trying to force fit so that he can say like, "Well, this student traveled all the way from US, meaning 4-hour flight." Like, "Oh, life savings and all that." I'm like, "I might take a hike. Let me watch cricket."
You missed a great chance to be on the front page, Subhash. Let's put it that way. Yeah, you have Amir, any memories of that game, of that non-game rather, Katpal?
2007, this is the year I graduated from university. And I think, especially in the future, but like I think after 1947, if there's like dates that really end up defining Pakistani history, you have 1971 when East Pakistan becomes Bangladesh after a civil war, and there's a lot of really horrific kind of violence from the West Pakistani end, and then you have 2007, a year where there's a huge civil rights movement by the judiciary. There is unprecedented levels of violence by militants and terrorists, which ends the year with Benazir Bhutto, the most iconic leader we had during the 90s, being assassinated by a terrorist attack. There'd been terrorist attacks in all the major cities, and as I said, there's civil unrest. This was also the year the media, the news media in Pakistan, which is also where I got my first job, really kind of came into its own, and so by the end of the year they were banned, and we had to go to work while no one could see what we were putting out. And so in the context of all that, when you look at the 2007 World Cup and the fact that not only does Pakistan have this shocking loss, but Bob Woolmer dies, and Bob Woolmer, I mean, Pakistan's had foreign coaches and also coaches. Bob Woolmer's one of the most, clearly the most influential coaches Pakistan ever had. And, it doesn't quite show up in the numbers, but he really took the the team after the 90s and the traumas of fixing and never really achieving their potential, and he creates this new look Pakistan side, and he identifies new kinds of attacks and options. And as Subhash pointed out earlier, like even though it felt like India had the upper hand, Pakistan still ended up winning more matches and competing from this almost this underdog kind of status. So Woolmer was such an important element in all of that, and so it was very close to a lot of the players as well. And so you don't just get knocked out of a World Cup, but you have this iconic, beloved, influential coach die as well. And in a way that again, like so many of the other things that happened just in that year, but also in the rest of Pakistani history, we never really processed it as a society or as a nation. And I don't think anyone processed 2007 really well. So it was really indicative of the kind of reality that Pakistan was existing in at that point. Like one of the great ironies was that in 2008, Karachi hosted the Asia Cup. And throughout growing up, Karachi didn't host any of the major test matches because it was too dangerous. And, in the 90s, like India only came for one days, etc. But even there'd been crowd trouble and this, that, and the other. And by 2008, it was the only city safe enough to host an event like this. And soon after that ended decisively as well. So I think at that moment, the trajectory of what is now the modern kind of Pakistan and its specific and unique challenges, it really reaches its climax there. And so it's almost, Joe, earlier Subhash was talking about that it's so irrational to pin your ideas about nationhood onto a cricket team. But I think it's inevitable in cricket, given its colonial history and given the fact that it has yet to really move past the politics that created it, and every now and then, obviously, we're imposing narrative onto completely random things. But something like 2007 happening, just the same way as that, like in India, a lot of people saw the 2000s team as very much emblematic of India's rise as an economic power. So same way in 2007, that World Cup campaign really chimes in with the sort of situation Pakistan was going through in that particular year.
Moving on to 2011, the biggest game, at least context-wise, that the two countries have played in a World Cup. I mean, this was the semi-final, as big as it gets. This was a World Cup which Pakistan were initially supposed to co-host, but they didn't. They had to play. They ended up playing all their games in Sri Lanka, but doing very well. I mean, they topped the group, and then came through to the semi-finals, and it was. Thought that it was one of the would be one of the really close games. It didn't end up being so close, but there were so many moments, and Pakistan, if not for the blunders in the field and umpiring, as many have spoken about, you never know what could have happened. But tell us about that game. I mean, Subhash, you were talking about how you and Katmal actually had a detailed discussion before this game.
Thanks to my experiences earlier, 8 years earlier, during a India-Pakistan game, so I did not have many emotions riding on this. So Katmal and we had become friends on social media, and we used to talk a fair bit. And this was one of those games, I was totally chilled out. I didn't really care. Even if I had, the Indian fan in me wanted India to beat Australia. Once the quarterfinal was done, everything else was bonus. That was the final for India, really. Because next whoever was going to come, and then whoever was going to be in the final, you knew India playing at home with the kind of team they had. It was a very, very solid team. They were going to win. But they had to get through Australia. And so there was really no pressure. And plus, I didn't really, the India-Pakistan thing really didn't matter to me that much. So I was completely relaxed.
And it wasn't, talking about batting first, again, it was another game, another World Cup game when India batted first. But they didn't really put up a massive total or anything. I mean, they did get a good score, I would say, on that pitch. But, with the Pakistan team and the way they had done in the World Cup, I was still thinking that there's a chance. And of course, India had brought in Ashish Nehra for that game. Famously, they had dropped Ashwin and brought in Ashish Nehra, and there was a lot of nerves there. But Nehra ended up bowling well, and as Dhoni famously said, Nehra gives us options. And and India, got through. But there was it. I wouldn't say that for at least 3/4 of the game, it was pretty tense, right?
No, actually. India got it like 260, I think. Tendulkar had, first Yunus Khan drops him.
Yeah, I think he had some 4 lives or something.
Like two catches were dropped, and then obviously one LBW, the tight LBW call, which was overturned on DRS. Manjarekar on air, I think, says that's out, and then it gets overturned. But anyway, but still they get to 260. It's like, but the thing is, in these matches, in this 260, they get through Rana, basically. And if you go back into like previous World Cup matches between India, Pakistan, there's this one guy that comes in at 6 and 7 that gives a very valuable contribution.
Yeah.
Robinson, Ajay Jadeja, except for 2003 because he didn't need it, because Dravid and Yuvraj took care of it. But there is even 92, Kapil Dev comes and scores a quick runs. So there's always somebody that does that. In this case, it was Raina, gives the final fillip for the score to become 260. Even though, you had Yunus Khan, Misbah, Hafeez, and the Akmal Badma, Kaminas, Akmal Kaminas, they're all there. But you're not like threatened. India has gotten through Australia. They'll get through Pakistan. No big deal. They're playing at home. And obviously Pakistan starts really well, but then completely falls apart because it's just some shitty, stupid, mindless, brain-fade cricket. Especially that Hafeez dismissal. I mean, like, what the hell are you thinking? But such is life. And then quickly, same thing, like even 2015, 2011, once the game had gone out of hand, Misbah scores runs. I'm not saying that Misbah did anything wrong. He was just hoping that somebody would stick around so that he can finally, do the Dhoni strategy of get the game towards the end as much as possible with as least damage as possible. And then, you can hit sixes, no problem. So, but nobody stuck around for him. But 11 and 15 kind of went in the same way.
I think one thing that I would say is that in the 11 match, Subhash is just spot on. But the fact that Pakistan had that kind of opening, innings where they dropped catches, but also felt like things were going against them with that LBW, and then again that Raina kind of sucker punch at the end. Um, I think that was already like a big momentum shift because again, like in that tournament so far, Pakistan actually had defeated Australia before India did, right?
Yeah,
And
correct.
that was a big kind of shock. They, again, like had
Actually, that
found
was the game that broke Australia's World Cup streak, right?
exactly, yeah. So Pakistan in Edgbaston, Headingley in '99, and then all the way back now in this World Cup is when Australia the first time they lose a match, and that was so the team really was kind of playing when it was doing well was playing more than a sum of its parts, right? Like both Afridi and Umar Gul had like absolutely insane World Cups. The batting was coming together. Somebody would kind of contribute, but like they weren't exactly setting the world on fire. One thing I would recommend to people who are listening is the Grantland American website. They did this thing where they gave two of their writers who had never seen cricket before. They gave them the full 8-hour tape of this match, and they said, "Just watch it and just write whatever you feel like." And it is absolutely hilarious. It's such a brilliant take on that match because it's from coming from such a bizarre context because they're trying to understand cricket as they're watching this match. And, it's really hilarious. But like, yeah, I think.
I mean,
Sorry.
going back to that Grantland piece on that game, you get how bigger than life, larger than life persona Afridi and Tendulkar were. Just by reading, they're like, oh, this guy must be some freaking genius, awesome guy. Because anytime he does anything, the crowd is going nuts. And this guy, Afridi, is like, he's the only one that can field, take catches. He's the one bowling well. Like anytime he has the ball in his hand, something is happening, right? They get that the magnetism of those two personalities. They get that just without even knowing anything about those guys. The Adelaide game, 2015. Sydney, we can move on to the next one, right?
Sure.
Yeah, 2015. I was coming to the tail end of the trip, the cricket world trip that I was doing with my wife, and I was covering the entire World Cup. Not all India games, but a lot of India games. And this was one of the games I was covering. And the night before the game, my wife and we drove from Melbourne to Adelaide overnight. I got to Adelaide. I did not have a place to stay in Adelaide. And somebody from Twitter contacted me midnight and said, like, oh, you come and crash in my house. Some Aussie legend he is, some fan, Aussie cricket fan. And I showed up in Adelaide at 7 a.m. He left the key under his doormat and he had gone to work. And I had never met this person before in my life. He had never met us. And he completely trusted us to, take the key, go in and not burn the house down. I love that aspect of humanity that, that trust your fellow human being. That, the thing is, like, he had only one thing to go by, which is that he was following me on Twitter. So he had known my cricket life. And that was enough for him to trust his house with me, which still blows my mind, the random acts of kindness that people are capable of.
I think that was a World Cup that I was actually covering for a TV channel. And it was a very bizarre way of getting that job as well. Again, Twitter related, where the head of the channel had previously come on air. He used to host a show, and I tweeted something against him, and he came on air and said, like, I'm going to get Karachi Cut on national TV. But then, like, 2 months later, myself and Nasanjeev and Rehan got this show, and it was a really, one of the best times I've had because we were on prime time on the biggest channel in the country, and we were really free to do whatever we wanted on that show. And that day, I think, like, we all went off on these rants against the Pakistani state and like just how society is done in general. Because I think, I mean, again, like if the 2017 Champions Trophy was an aberration, you put that to one side, like, just for the longest time, like it just hasn't felt like a contest, let alone a rivalry. And there's lots of reasons for that, that are out of the PCB's hands, I feel. But there's, they haven't done the best of that terrible situation at all. That's something that is, I think, was at that point in world cricket and at that World Cup, it was quite painfully obvious. Like Pakistan, Subhash, you actually covered, one of the most iconic World Cup matches we ever played versus South Africa and New Zealand. And that was really the high point for Pakistan in that World Cup. This was that moment where I think, maybe for, obviously all of us are much older as well. So we should ask somebody who watched this as a 15-year-old and how they felt. And I'm sure there was a lot more emotional for them, given how now there's an entire industry around, the Pakistan-India fixtures and hyping them up. And, every brand has a campaign around it. And, again, it obviously sounds very cliche and cynical to talk about how commercialized this has gotten, but that's just a fact. Like, the last couple of World Cups, because I've, again, been working as a writer and social media, like, I've just been able to firsthand see a lot of how corporates have tried to, like, really build stuff around this. And the 2007 World Cup obviously was a moment that gave corporates pause, but then right after that, the ICC's made sure that you won't have that problem again. It becomes a really, what should I say? Like it's the occasion itself, regardless of however it plays out, has so much riding on it just because everybody else realizes that this is the one time, everyone tunes in. But I think even the television numbers were kind of not as exciting as they were for the Mohali encounter.
In basketball, when the one team dominates and it's basically like Misbah is the king of garbage time. Like Ajay Jadeja used to be the king of garbage time for India. Like when India is a no chance saloon, he'll coolly score a 50. Like his average is set. I'm not saying Misbah did that. Misbah genuinely believed that he could win the game by delaying it. But he's the king of garbage time. Like even Adelaide game, once the two century partnerships happened in India and they put 300 on the board. Kohli's century, Raina and Shikhar Dhawan half centuries. Basically, the game was done, right? But then Pakistan start decently, but then collapse, and then Misbah makes up the runs in the end. So it's only like a 70-run loss, 65-run loss or something. Whereas it felt like they lost by 150 or 200 runs.
Yeah, I think in fact from the moment that it felt like that till the moment the game ended, Misbah was batting like Viv Richards. Like he was just like freaking hitting everything for the boundary and whatever. But everybody had given up on the game a long time ago.
Yeah.
I would argue the 2007 innings weren't really garbage time, but definitely 2015 and to an extent 2011 were in that zone. And that was the frustrating part about being a Pakistan fan in this era. The PSL has kind of given us something to work with. At least we can hit England for 350 whenever we feel like it. But it's like, it was especially at this time where, we had Nasir Jamshed playing and Yunus Khan playing and, they were just these, it was, again, this is the generation that kind of lost out on home cricket and then T20 cricket as a franchise thing. And it really was, 2011, it wasn't so obvious perhaps, but 2015, it was really beginning to show on everything from the kind of kits the two teams were wearing to the, the general shape and age and the kind of haircuts and the kind of shots, the kind of skill sets.
Pakistan seemed like a team that was frozen in time.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
We need to talk about the 2017 Champions Trophy because it was the final. First of all, it was a big tournament, a final, and how out of the blue, did that come for you in Khatmal? And how surprised were you by that victory?
Before Amar can say anything, I want to jump in and say that I yield my time to Amar because I completely skipped that match.
Okay.
I never gone back and looked at it.
Okay, so it's wiped out from your. Then you don't even have a memory. You didn't
I
happen.
didn't remember.
Okay.
Never saw it.
I think that Champions Trophy final, personally. So what had happened if we go back to 2011? At that moment, I'm like somebody who writes a blog on cricket and has had enough success that Subhash has kind of asked me to be one of several writers on a congregated blog. And by the time 2017 comes around, at this point, I've gone on to write for Cricket Info and then work with the PCB and then have friends who are working there. And the PSL is launched and two of the managers of the winning side and et cetera, et cetera. So the same group of friends that were all just Twitter people back then were now, working within the establishment at some level or another. And when we lost to India in that first group game, and it was such a humiliating loss, I remember I was living in Lahore and I called up my friends. And so Tiddy and Rehan worked for Islamabad United, but Tiddy used to work in PCB, and Imran Khan is working in the PCB. And we went to this ice cream place, and I was like, guys, we have to figure out, we have to kind of dedicate our lives over the next 5 years or something, and pursue Pakistan cricket more and catch up. And again, because you're working in it, you kind of see stuff outside the way the game is run with personal kind of fitness or endorsements or investment opportunities and the whole gamut of what it means to be a modern cricketer. You see where Pakistan is lacking in a lot of ways, and so there's this feeling that it really got showed up in that match against India. And so we're done with this meeting. We come up with a bunch of things they subsequently have either written about then or before or whatever, but everything from the domestic structure to pitches to the broadcasting deal for the PSL to this, that, and the other. Pakistan didn't lose a single match in the Champions Trophy after that. and after having a kind of just beside South Africa, then have this very nervy win against Sri Lanka. But then against England and India, they're just clinical. It's just insane. And in that moment, it was obviously extremely emotional. But when you kind of come back to it, getting Kohli out twice in 2 balls, I think that just on its own is headline news. But just everything in that match, Pakistan was just so dominant. And it's really, again, Usman's latest piece for that England win, where he said it's, just one of those matches, just like a tangle of strings that only this Pakistan at this time can untangle. That match kind of goes like that, where Hafeez, has this amazing innings. Waqar has this reprieve, and, he's very new to his career. The bowling had a great template, but Amir was coming back from injury and, wasn't as good as everyone had remembered him, but he does brilliantly to get rid of Rohit and Kohli. The fielding's going really well. And, it's the kind of, again, it was very much watching the kind of 90s cricket, but with a completely new cast. And I think also because there was one of the reasons that match went the way it did was that there was enough freshness about that side. So, somebody, when you take on now Yuvraj again, is now the symbol of the kind of decaying old guard of Indian cricket. And he gets out to Shadab, who's very much, Shadab is a really incredible story that 6 months ago, he was playing his first PSL. I was working with Islamabad United, and, he was a teenager and he looked and acted like one, a bit lost and everything. And I remember we were standing watching a practice game, and Wasim Akram, who's also working with the team, walks over to Rehan and Chima and was like, "Ye tum log ne bada sahi bacha dhoonda hai." And 6 months later, he's convincing Sarfraz that in a cauldron of a final of a global tournament against India, and he's like, "Take the review. I know he's out." And it was such an amazing moment to kind of watch that insane level of progress. And so yeah, so like everything that in that kind of reverse Murphy's law, where everything that had to go right did go right for Pakistan. And that was another thing that I was trying to contrast with this last win against England, is that at least in that match, like Pakistan was just so good on every the one against England and the one against India, that they kind of really exploited every advantage that they had to the maximum. They're very clinical, very different from the way that they've been in general, and particularly even in that last win against England.
Yeah, so if Subhash didn't watch that game, but if he had watched it, he would have told you exactly the reasons why Pakistan won it, by the way. And so,
No, I mean, because they get, as you said, so badly beaten by India that you guys went to the ice cream parlor to draw up the template for the future of Pakistan cricket. And then 4 games later, everything is okay. So that means like you're projecting your feelings onto the team, whereas it's the same players basically. The conditions may have changed slightly, playing conditions, but it's the same players, same skills. It's not going to change in 2 weeks.
So let's move on to 2019 then. We are recording this on the day the Pakistan-Sri Lanka game got washed out. So which means that both teams have to play Australia. India plays Australia next, and then Pakistan play Australia after that in the middle of the week before taking India-Pakistan. So let's have some predictions, guys. I know there's still 2 games to go, and both teams could collapse spectacularly against Australia, and that could change things, or they could beat whatever. But anything could happen. But at this stage, what do you think is going to happen at Old Trafford?
Old Trafford, venue of India v Pakistan 99, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on paper, obviously, India is a much stronger side. And since and it seems like, Pakistan has hit its stride, and India seemed to be working out okay, I think. And I would expect India to win the game pretty straightforward, whether batting first or chasing, no matter. They have the depth both in. I mean, I think India has one of the strong bowling lineups in the tournament, so which is kind of rare for an Indian side in World Cup tournaments to say that India has one of the strongest bowling lineup. So I expect India to win the game quite easily.
What about you, Khatmal?
I would back Subhash on this. Pakistan also, I don't know about hitting their stride, are in this situation where this match is coming at a time where it's not a must win. And like it's something that would be really great and everybody would love it and whatever, but it's not a must win for the team. And especially the way the World Cup is playing out, it really does feel like this will be quite close, and a lot of teams will be in the mathematical hunt for it till later on. And so if Pakistan doesn't have that kind of motivation where it knows it's like this is do or die, the talent gap is too big to make up as it is. It would need like an extraordinary set of circumstances. And that might still happen. Again, Pakistan has that delightful capacity to it. But I think that, again, there's not, even if you look at their last major encounter in England at the Champions Trophy final, since then, like Pakistan hasn't really moved forward that much. You can't really say that this is a much more improved Pakistani team. While India has improved, particularly as Swash pointed out in the bowling, in the spin bowling, and the pace bowlers have only gotten better. And then you have obviously Indian batting. So Pakistan, on the other hand, is kind of, with maybe Imam being really the only new thing that's come in, and then one of the pacers. Otherwise, it's pretty much that same old team that's had a pretty poor record since that match. So unless like a lot of things go right for Pakistan, this should be a pretty comfortable win for India.
All right. So I think that was great. Want to thank Subhash and Khatmal for joining us on this memory trip. Thank you.
Thanks, Sid.
It was a pleasure.
That brings us to the end of another episode of the 81 All Out podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever else you prefer. It would be wonderful if you could leave a rating and review so that more people can find us. You can also follow us on Twitter at 81 All Out and check out our previous podcasts and articles on our website, 81allout.com. We love to hear back from you, so please send us your feedback. Thanks for listening.